Thank you all very much. Well, moving on to a different issue. A question from David Churchill. Could you wave wherever you... Oh, that's convenient.
No doubt you'll each say that you want a just and fair society, but what is in your mind, and more especially, what's in your heart when you say that?
Right. Roger, so it's a very awkward place to sit. Roger, you're going to start answering this one, yeah?
This speaks to the heart of my philosophy. I do want to live in a fair and just society, and I was a bit surprised to hear what Jeremy just said, and how he went on about what our fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers did in the world wars, and to fight for the freedoms that we now have and enjoy, most of which are on their way to Brussels right now, and we're giving them away just as easily, well, not as easily as they won them. And I have the feeling that if my father, I have this dreadful vision that I might die, go to heaven, meet my father, who will say, I gave up 6 years of my life so that Britain could be free. What did your generation do? Nothing. You just let it be stolen from you by a European superstate. And that's what worries me. So an awful lot of this revolves around us being able to keep our nation as our nation, and that is the very core of my beliefs. So.
David, I was taken by the philosophical twist at the end of your question as to the difference between what might be in my heart and my head when I thought about fairness and justice, but it's actually the same thing. I don't have to differentiate between the two. For me, and I think this speaks for, I'm sure, others, but certainly everyone, I'm sure, in the Labour Party, social justice is about ensuring that nobody is disadvantaged in their life by dint of where they came from, their background, what their parents did, what the colour of their skin is, what their gender is, what their sexuality is, what they want their sexuality to be, even. Social justice is about treating all people equally. And what that means in terms of policies, what it means in terms of why we're a political party and not just a social movement, is because it means we think there is a role, actually, for society to get together in the form of the state and organise things, not in a bossy way, not in a way that tells people what to do, but in a way that reflects those values. So it does mean that we get together and say, well, let's all pool our resources and have something called the NHS. Let's pool our resources and have something called state education. Let's pool our resources and have something called Sure Start, so children from particularly disadvantaged backgrounds get help. Let's pool our resources and have state pensions, so that irrespective of your income, you have dignity and respect in your later life. That's what social justice means to me. But it also means, as well as those just rewards, when people transgress those rules, social justice also demands that something is done about them, which is why we do believe in prison sentences for people who transgress the law. We don't believe in necessarily letting them out early, and we do believe acting toughly when people play fast and loose with the system, for instance, if they cheat on benefits or do something which goes outside of that pale. So that's what's in my heart and in my mind, and I think of everybody in the Labour Party.
Well, a fair society, the whole of the Liberal Democrat manifesto is about fairness. I'm sure you've all read it. I'm going to try and talk from a personal point of view. I've spent my working life working with very disadvantaged young people with the YMCA for over 20 years. And I've worked with many homeless young people and with young people with serious drug and alcohol problems, for example, young people at risk of being thrown out of school. And young people are often given a sort of stereotypical image of that's very negative in the media. But I always say to people that you should give young people a break, because almost all the evil in the world is caused by adults. And I think a fair society starts with the young. And that's why I'm delighted that our Liberal Democrat Party are proposing to put a huge amount of money into schools. We've identified £15 billion worth of savings. Vince Cable is the man, of course, who's identified those. And out of that 15 billion, we're going to reinvest 5 billion, 2.5 billion of which is going to go into schools. Because I think we need to lift the standards in our schools. And we also need to have quality youth services for our young people. So that's where we start on the issue of fairness. But I'm deeply committed to justice, to social justice, but that doesn't mean to say I'm a soft, woolly, wishy-washy liberal. Because I do believe also in justice for the victims of crime. And I'm probably like you, get very angry when I see, through court cases and so on, how the victims of crime are not treated justly. And actually there's not fairness in that system. So it's a balance, but all young people deserve a good break in life, a fair start in life. And as far as we can achieve it, an equal opportunity at the start of their lives. We know that, I'm not a socialist, we know that there will be inequality as time goes on, but they should have that fair start. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it's a very, very important question. And I suppose I look at some of the things that happen now in our society, and I just think that we have to not accept them, but for example, Gary Newlove, the person who was murdered within yards of his front door by a group of young thugs who were causing a disturbance. For example, Baby P, who was checked by doctors 50 times and still came to an absolutely tragic end. And I think that, I won't say like Mike, I'm coming after Mike, if I say that you'll all say that this is an I agree with Nick moment, but I think there's but I think that I'm not a socialist either, and there is of course inequality that happens in society, but I think that the way that you hold society together, recognising that some people will work harder, will earn more money than others, the way you hold society together is to make sure that there are some fundamental tenets of justice that are respected. And I think that it revolves around the concept of responsibility. I think we need to have a society where people are encouraged to do the right thing. And that means people who can work are encouraged to work and not to stay out of work. And that's very often not their fault, it's the fault of the benefit system that penalises people for wanting to do the right thing. But just as people need to show responsibility to do the right thing, we also need to have a sense of collective responsibility for others who are unable to help themselves. And I think getting that balance right is incredibly important. And I just say that when it comes to schools, I think that there are some very important reforms that we can make, and I think this is one of the areas which David Cameron has said would be one of the most radical things that he would want a new Conservative government to do. And the first is to sort out once and for all the problem of discipline in schools, because it is a huge problem in schools if you don't have an environment that allows learning to happen. And we've had so many rules and regulations that have made it difficult for teachers to impose discipline. And in particular, I think the most dangerous thing of all is that heads don't have the final say as to whether to exclude a child, so that when you have a child that is being particularly disruptive, the heads find themselves powerless to really do something about that. But the second thing I think is we need to have a new generation of schools, something that's happening very successfully in Sweden, so that we can allow charities and parents groups to get involved in the running of new schools. And that way we can create a bit of diversity within what is at the moment quite a monolithic state education system. So reforming state education, I think, is at the heart of how we're going to deal with some of the injustices that we see at the moment.